I was in the middle of a corporate meeting in California, and the room was really tense. There was one of the executives was pacing the floor. She was about to blow a fuse, and everyone, you could tell, it was braced for impact. And in that moment of kind of chaos, the only thought I had was, if I just had a Pepsi, I'd know what to do. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but how often do we look for something, anything, outside of ourselves just to feel okay, if only for a minute? Today, Haydn and I are talking about a radical shift, a way of looking at integrity in a radically different way. Welcome to Becoming You, the Path to Consciousness, where we apply spiritual wisdom and truth to your everyday life. Today we're going to explore the intersection of ancient wisdom and modern evolution to help you find your way back to your most whole, sincere self. I'm Terry Hasty.
And I'm Haydn Hasty, and today we're going to talk about the vital issue of integrity.
Integrity, in the way that we're going to talk about today, is the condition of being whole and complete, needing nothing from anybody or anything for any reason to be okay. You were born whole and complete, and I've never seen any parent, including us, Haydn, look at their newborn child and say, this one's okay, I guess. Or, could we send this one back? We're born perfect. We're born whole and complete. But it doesn't take long for us to start to forget that, or to destroy really that truth. Because as we grow up, we start to form our perceptions not only of the world, like how men are, that's how women are, that's good, that's bad, that's how marriage is. But we also judge ourselves against all of that, and we always come up a little short in that comparison. And as we start to see ourselves as lacking in any of these 1,000 ways, like I'm not smart enough or pretty enough or likable, acceptable, we look out there and say, well, I need that, whether it's those designer shoes or that relationship or that job or that car, that will make me okay. And once I decide I need that, then I'll give up my integrity, not really meaning to or not conscious about it, but we compromise ourselves in order to have or keep a thing that we think, or a person that we think that we need in order to be okay, to be good enough.
I would say that while it may not be done deliberately, we're aware. The individual is aware of when they are compromising their integrity. And integrity is to your everyday life as spiritual truth is to your awakening. Integrity is the glue that holds your material, physical life together. Without it, your cosmos, your everyday life just eventually spins out of control. And it's always just a matter of time, but it will.
And it's, when you said spinning out of control, it made me think, it's not just about morality or beliefs about right or wrong, or those are important societal things we have in place so that we can coexist. Everybody makes mistakes. Here, we'll try this out. We've done this in groups before. Raise your hand if you have ever been betrayed. And usually every hand goes up.
Yep.
Sure.
I've never seen anyone not raise their hand.
I know, it's true. We think about it, but in some way or another, we've all been betrayed. And now we'll do another exercise. Raise your hand if you have never betrayed another person.
And everybody has.
Yeah. So it's not about blaming or being holier than thou. I mean, we all mess up. We all compromise our integrity, especially when we're young, by acting other than how we truly are, even how we truly feel. We act in complete, the adverse of how we actually feel. We'll say something to somebody that's not even accurate, but it comes out of our mouth anyway, because we're still defending against that fear that we aren't good enough, or we're disrespected, or we're not appreciated, or we're not loved, and we forget that we came into the world already whole and complete.
I want to weigh in personally about this. I remember I was in my late 20s, and I was just starting to get a handle on my life. I had made some mistakes, but was in the hands of the first teacher I was working with, and my relationship with my boss was continuing to grow and enlarge. So, I was getting a lot of really good feedback about some of my shortcomings. And by the time I was like in my early 30s, I think I'd say around 33, 34, up in there, I really did. I thought that I had finally, kind of gained this integrity and this, a way of where I could be trusted, etc. A lot of different ways to look at it. But I felt really good about myself until I read Ron Smothermon's Transforming Number One.
And it's not even a big book. It's just
well, the amount of time that he spent talking about integrity covered no more than, I would say, it was somewhere between 2 and 4 pages. But when I read his descriptions of what integrity was, it was a really sad moment for me. And I can remember because I had no choice, but in looking at his concepts of integrity, I did not have integrity. And that really bothered me, but it was something that was going to stick with me because based on what it was that he described and how we move our way back to the truth of who we are and are able to function with integrity, I knew that I wanted that, and I wanted that in my life. But here I was having to, essentially confess again that I thought I had accomplished something that I had not.
And Smothermon's work was such a foundation for starting our business over 30 years ago now, and deeply influenced all of our work and how we wanted to be with people, how we wanted to be with one another.
And what we wanted to truly teach.
First, we're going to teach it. I remember we were going up to Ohio, and I was so nervous about it because I thought people are going to reject this. They're going to think we're being critical. It's too personal, talking about their integrity, and there wasn't an actual assessment that went with it, But what I recognized immediately was people latched onto it. It spoke to people. It resonates with people because we know that it's who we are. That's what's, I'm about to say something that's a little more disturbing because we do know that we're whole and complete, but we don't operate that way. And Smotherman, and actually David Hawkins in his book, Power versus Force, said the same thing, that about 75 to 80% of people live their lives, relate, work, really see themselves in these bottom 3 of the 10 levels of integrity, the bottom 3 being disloyalty, opposition, and uncertainty. And a lot of groups that we've worked with, when we share that statistic, they disagree and say it's probably more like 85 or 90% of people operate in those lower 3. And it all comes back to this fragmented experience of ourselves. We have a physical life, but we are a spiritual being, and we haven't learned how to unify those two.
A divided mind creates a divided life. And in those lower areas of integrity that Smotherman spoke about, that we're going to talk about in just a second, it's nothing but division. That's all there is. So there are kind of 2 pieces to this. One is physical, and the other is metaphysical. So in the physical, in terms of the ego, integrity is often associated with scarcity because people will do anything in the world to relieve themselves of what they feel they're missing inside. That scarcity of whether it is intangible like love or it is tangible like money. So, as we are witness to every single day, watching people pretend to be something that they're not. And in fact, particularly with everything that we are witnessing today with what is being referred to as the Epstein class, as if you didn't know this before, and you should have known this before, the Epstein class and what is taking place there is such a perfect example of people pretending to be something that they are not. But they're good at it, and this is part of the issue that creates problems for other people.
But it eventually will come to light, and we've all had that happen ourselves. As soon as we deceive or pretend, it's impossible to sustain forever. Now, this has been sustained with the Epstein class a long time, but it will eventually come to light.
Oh, well, it always does. It's like if you go back to when you were really young, you thought that you had gotten away with it, when in fact your parents, knew within 5 minutes of, something that you'd done wrong. So I want to say this with as much conviction as I can. If you don't have integrity, which we're going to begin to define in just a second, you don't have anything. I don't care how much money you have. What if you have all the money in the world, but you have no integrity? Then the outcome of your life is not going to be something that you will enjoy, and it's only a matter of time before the circumstances of life are going to show up, and you're going to have to learn the hard way. And we've all done it, so it's not pointing fingers. We all screw up. We all make mistakes. But let's talk about how to deal with this and how to move upward and into higher levels of integrity in our life. But not because it is morally right. It has nothing to do with that.
It's interesting that Smothermon's model has 10 levels, but we're going to start at the bottom because those are the ones that get us into the most trouble. And disloyalty is the very bottom. People in disloyalty, honestly, it's funny to use the word honestly in that context.
Freudian slip.
They truly believe that everyone else is lying and you're a sucker if you don't, and that if they betray you or stab you in the back, it's just because you were about to do it to them. People in disloyalty are pretentious. They, like Haydn was saying, they pretend to be something other than they are. They're secretive. They'll sell others out. They're very anonymous. So they look one way, like Michael Douglas in that movie, Wall Street. He looked to be, very successful and like he was a mentor to younger people, but he would literally sell out his mother. I think he does in the movie. So people in disloyalty cannot be trusted, but they believe that you can't be trusted either, and so that makes relationship with them very difficult. It's a very painful place to be as a human being.
But it's also because they think they have to do that in order to get what they want and in order to be okay. And two really great movies about the restoration of integrity in an individual's life. Now, you have to watch the whole film to get to the end of it. One is Al Pacino in Scent of a Woman, if you haven't seen that great movie about integrity, and then also to see Denzel Washington in the movie Flight, which is nothing short of spectacular, and how integrity can be regained in a person's life.
We've all done things like we were saying, especially when we're younger, but it's not limited to that we had to take the consequences for. That's the thing about disloyalty. Eventually, the curtain is pulled back and you see who Oz really is. And that's the painful part of disloyalty.
The problem with disloyalty for me in growing up was that I'm not good at it.
You're still not good at it.
I'm still not good. I'm not a good liar. And it's not because I didn't try, when I was really young, but I'm just not good at it. I get upset. I start grinning. I stutter. So
just don't give the dog the leftover meatloaf. Just stop doing it.
Terry would sometimes come home and look in the fridge and can't find something. And she would say, did you give this to the dog? Well, of course I did, but I'm not going to admit it. But it didn't take but a second for that look to come over my face. So it's not that I'm not trying to paint myself as not having been in disloyalty. It's just that I was not very good at it, so I had to move on.
And frankly, those of us who are lucky enough to be held accountable for our disloyal behavior, I could give plenty of examples of that, especially when I was younger. We're the lucky ones because we learn it just doesn't work.
Disloyalty is about learning to tell the truth. Mm-hmm. To tell the truth to yourself first, and then to tell the truth about yourself to others, people that love you, people that you trust. And to tell the truth, you just keep it going, to tell the truth to other people about them, that they are far more talented than they're aware of, to remind them of the truth of who and what they are.
It's like I'll compromise myself if I need you, back to that definition of integrity. If I need you to like me, I won't tell you the truth. I'll compromise, myself. And then what kind of friend or relationship is that really?
And well, then the anger grows. Mm-hmm. But this is about learning to tell the truth in a very appropriate, healthy way, not necessarily all the details, but that is also going to include being able to express your anger in an appropriate, healthy way. Now, I'm not talking about rage. I'm talking about anger. And this is going to take some courage
and I think
to learn.
Just a quick qualifying comment about telling the truth. It's not telling the truth to be self-deprecating or to hurt another person. It's telling the truth to move things forward, to take responsibility, to allow things to be out in the open. And once we can do that, we can move up to the next level in his integrity model, which is opposition. And opposition here is not opposing things that aren't right. It's not standing up for the underdog. Opposition here is just the need to be right. It's the need to elevate myself with my own resistance. It's not about mission and purpose. So those are two different things. This opposition is just about resistance, breaking things, being right, pushing somebody else aside or down. Well, and that's a really ugly way of opposing versus standing up for what's right.
Well, being right includes the need to make somebody else wrong. Mm-hmm. And this is, it's a huge problem in love relationships when people get in an argument because, that's the goal of the mind that's stuck in opposition, is to be right. I may not have spent a lot of time in disloyalty, but I spent probably half my life in opposition.
I liked your T-shirt. You used to say, you had a T-shirt on the front said, "Go ahead and tell me what to do."
Well, I don't know if I can say the back of the T-shirt. Go ahead and tell me what to do. And the back of my T-shirt said, "And I'll tell you to
kiss."
We'll
there you go. That's enough.
but that was my open opposition. I'm not going to do what you tell me to. I'm not going to follow the rules. I'm not going to get trapped into, trying to be something that you want me to be. And while I think that has its value for a young person, it's going to be very detrimental as one continues to grow up.
Opposition, of course, can also be very passive-aggressive. It's not always in your face, but the difference between opposition and disloyalty is kind of anonymous, secretive, pretentious. Opposition is Scar in Lion King. We're going to kill the king. There'll be a chicken in every pot. Follow me. I'm taking him out. People in opposition tell you they don't like you. They disagree with you in front of everybody else. They put their opinions up on social media for everybody to read. You don't have to give up being right. You just give up the need to be right. In other words, you don't have to make an issue for everybody else. You can be right, and maybe they are also right.
So if you want to practice this tonight, do it and watch and see what happens, which is when you get home tonight, stop arguing. Give up the need to argue, fuss, and make the other person out to be wrong. This is where integrity is born in the simplest things, aspects of your life at home, in dealing with your children, in dealing with your partner. Just the simplest things. Now, we can apply it in the corporate setting, of course, but where it begins is in your own personal life that will then transfer over into your work life.
So if we get this habit of telling the truth, not the truth about your emotion or about your self-worth issues or about the fact that you weren't disrespected, but the real truth of how you really are. We're telling the truth. We're giving up the need to be right, particularly about this thing called I'm not good enough. Give up the need to be right. Then we can move into the next level. And again, it's moving up. It's a ladder. These are higher states of being. You can move up into uncertainty.
Uncertainty is a condition that always leads the individual to basically finding themselves in situations that they should not be in, but got drawn to it, were attracted to it, thinking, well, maybe if I join this club, maybe if I do this, I'll feel better about myself, because the individual is uncertain and looking for answers. Well, the problem about looking for answers
out there,
if you go looking for a savior, you're going to find one, and here is the full issue of what a cult is. But if you're uncertain, you have a tendency to be looking for answers outside of yourself.
Of course, you could also find a really significant teacher in somebody that's going to lift you up and continue your march toward greater and greater integrity.
This is part of how you get out of uncertainty. For almost 20 years, we were a primary vendor for the North Carolina Teaching Fellows Program. Our job was creating week-long enrichment programs, and the programs were for rising juniors and seniors across the North Carolina higher education system in North Carolina. And I can always remember so many of those kids being in uncertainty, which is really perfect. I mean, it's right there at that age where that is supposed to be taking place. So I remember one of the students asked me one time, he said, how do you buy a house? Because, if you remember being 19, 20 years old, you didn't know these things. A lot of uncertainty is out there. So Terry, you've kind of answered part of it, which is how do I continue to grow and move out of uncertainty? And that first one is form a relationship with somebody who's made it out of the mess. You might see someone on TV that you're really attracted to and go, I'd really like to know more about what they're talking about. Well, call them up. They're no different than you are. That was how I met my first teacher. But be discerning and don't be naive, and understand that your desire is pure. You want to improve your life, you want to grow, etc. But trust your intuition.
And there are other times that we cycle into uncertainty, but the more that we gain as far as our own integrity, our own center, our own kind of self-support, the less time we spend in these lower levels. We might cycle back into them briefly, but then we move back up pretty quickly because we've gained the awareness and the skills.
Well, there's another really important aspect of uncertainty that involves so many young people in the world today, because as they are confronting this issue of not being able to afford a home, not being able to even really afford, renting an apartment without, including roommates, etc. There's just tremendous uncertainty taking place today at younger and younger levels. And there is another characteristic here that Smothermon spoke about that I think is a true treasure. In order to get out of uncertainty, you have to do what I call dojo work. Now, if you go to Karate Kid 2, when Mr. Miyagi and Daniel are in Okinawa, one morning Daniel wakes up and he goes to find him, but he can't find him. Finally tracks him down. And Mr. Miyagi is in this little room practicing what appears to me to be Tai Chi. It may be karate, but it looks a lot like Tai Chi. But essentially, Mr. Miyagi looks at him and says, "This is my dojo. When I was little, this is where I came to practice being my best. And when I come home and visit family, this is where I come to practice being my best." This is an essential aspect of integrity, to treat every situation that you are in, good or bad, through being the best that you can be. If you work at McDonald's, be the best employee that they have ever seen. But not because you should or because you owe somebody anything, but because you are starting to get the idea that to become your best, you have to practice being your best. And so this is dojo work. And it's a very different way of looking at this issue of uncertainty.
It can happen in the most mundane ways, and this just happened recently. So when I say we cycle kind of through these integrity, it's not like a ladder where we're just going up, we never return. It's more like a spiral staircase. I remember, what was I fixing? I was fixing I fixed French toast, and you didn't love it because I used this other bread, and I thought it was going to be delicious French toast with this bread, but it was a little bit heavy and dense. And because I do most of the cooking and I have some enjoyment around that and I like the experience of it, sometimes I can get a little overzealous about, you liking what I fix, whatever. Well, you didn't really like the French toast with that bread. And my small self, if I was down in the opposition or even uncertainty, I would have said, well, if he can't eat what I fix, he can just go hungry. But the dojo work is to just make some new French toast. What did it cost me? It's not like being a doormat to anybody.
Well, not because you should.
No.
It's not about obligation.
Was the experience that I wanted to have of myself, and to be flexible, to be loving, to tell that little voice that says, there you go again, not being approved of, not being appreciated, right, and all this, to just tell that voice, sit down, I don't need you anymore. And to go ahead and fix the French toast. And the amazing thing was, as soon as I did it, you got up, you came over, you put your arms around me, you were so appreciative, way more than it really warranted, just putting some more toast in the egg, washed. But it's, what do I want? How do I want to experience myself? And what do I want to have happen next? The rewards are so small when we come out of, our small self, and the rewards can be so grand, the outcome, even more than what we would have expected.
See,
and that's dojo work to me.
This issue, whether it involves a spiritual path, whether it's trying to figure out how to master your physical life, this is not about talk. This is not about just reading a book. Mm-hmm. This is about the pursuit of a lived experience that you have of yourself that changes your life. I remember when in the early years of our business, we rented cars from the one car place, maybe not even a half a mile from here. And every time that I would go down there to pick up the car, there was a guy that was always on the outside. He was the one that was in charge of cleaning the cars. Walter Marvel. And Walter was in charge of getting the cars cleaned up. And every time I went there, he would stop what he was doing. He would address me. He would communicate with me, ask me how I was doing, etc. Was I happy with the car, etc. And finally, one day, I was down there, and I didn't even go straight into the office. I just walked over to where Walter was, and I looked at him, and I said, can I ask you a question? He said, sure. I said, why are you washing this car? And we started talking, and I said to him, I said, Walter, I said, you should own this. I said, you have the ability to do this. Well, it was an incredible, wonderful conversation, and several years later, Walter had his own transportation company. I just, to me, he was a perfect example of an individual willing to do dojo work, because you will be noticed. And people want people with integrity in their business. They want to do business with them. And Walter, to me, was such a wonderful example of a man that was willing to do the dojo work that then propelled him up into owning his own business and being a preferred vendor for a lot of people in town for their transportation needs.
When we move out of uncertainty, it's because we're making a choice. That's part of the dojo work. I'm choosing to not engage in old behaviors, not engage in the old way of thinking and doing. And you might lose friends. This next level is injury. You might lose some friends that people prefer you being in opposition or disloyalty where they are. But in injury, we start taking a deeper level of responsibility for our lives and our choices. It's not I'm a victim to circumstances, it's I'm creating my life from this kind of place of original wholeness we're coming back in touch with. I claim my life. I'm moving out of blaming other people or blaming my childhood or blaming circumstances, and I'm creating a life that I choose to do.
It is apologizing, and I would say apologizing publicly. I've asked, over the years, I've asked many groups, how many times have you seen, for example, a leader apologize in front of a group or a team for something they did wrong? There are very few examples of that because people don't do that. Mm-hmm. But when they do, of course, the ego is just going to flip out and resist that and go, don't do that, don't say that. But what is happening when the individual begins to operate in injury in this profound way of taking responsibility and apologizing is, once again, you are gaining ground.
Now, it's a short-term loss for a long-term gain.
This is difficult, and it's difficult for anybody because of how the mind operates. The mind will do anything in the world to avoid being wrong because it associates being wrong with dying.
Because one of the problems with integrity is if we do come clean to the wrong person, they can end up using it against us too.
Well, that's just part of the learning process. Yeah. And so injury, we're now out of that 75-80%. We're in the top, somewhere between 10 and 20% of people with those three lowest levels representing the dead zone, red zone of, really low integrity. But this propels us up into an incredible place in life that Smothermon referred to as non-existence. Now, in non-existence, of course, the years have gone by. Maybe the person is 35, 40, 45 years old. Let's say you have a nice home, you have a nice car. You're not driving the
jalopy,
that you had when you were 20. It's not breaking down every month. Things are going really well. You have a good job, but then you get bored. And what does the mind do when it gets bored? It can only access that which it has experienced before. So, as we can see, I hate to keep harping on this, but as we can see in what is being referred to as the Epstein class, you can have all the money in the world and yet compromise your integrity seeking stuff that you think is going to make you feel better, when in fact all it is a trip back down into the nightmare of those lower levels of integrity.
Because just common sense wise and existence wise, if I'm trying to fill a hole with money or possessions or power or status, fill a hole that does not even exist, then I'm not going to be successful. I'm just going to keep feeling that lack of something, but the actual lack of something is the understanding that I am much more than what I believe myself to be.
It's the craziest thing in the world to look at how the mind operates. When you get to a certain point, what Terry just said is far more than true. It cannot be solved, the hole cannot be filled because it doesn't exist in the first place. It's something you made up. It's something that you basically summarized about your life that you thought was true, but it's not. And so there's nothing that can fill that hole because you were never not whole and complete in the first place until you made up, that story about your life and what happened to you. On the other hand, that's just kind of part of the process. It's perfectly okay. So you can travel all you want to, and you've got, the person has resources and funds, and you can live a life of travel, et cetera, but eventually it's going to have to confront itself because that's not why you're here.
So how do we get out of non-existence? We know how we get out of the low ones.
Well, this is what changed my life, because that was what I read in the early 80s that set me back in Smothermon's. I knew that I had not crossed that line out of non-existence, because in order to get out of non-existence and the boredom, you're going to have to take a risk. It's time to dream. It's time to really look carefully at the purpose of your life, of why you're here, and to have the courage to take those next steps toward the lived experience of that truth as you know it to be. And with that in mind, here comes the danger.
And if this is something that, I'm just putting this in, Haydn, if this is something that you would like to explore with us, if you feel like you might be in this non-existence place, consider joining us when we're at the Omega Institute in July, the end of July. You can see more information about it in our notes or on our website.
And our BecomingNewJourney.com online project, which is just stellar. It's a significant opportunity for all of us, for Terry and I involved in it as well. But this issue of danger is very, very real. You may fail. You may run out of money. You may run out of support. Your idea may fall flat on its face. But unless you try, you will never know. But here is the danger that exists after non-existence. It is time at this point, while you still have time, to look carefully at your life and go, who is it that I truly want to be?
And what is it that you dream? What is it that really floats your boat, melts your butter? What is it that you say, I want this, I want to try this, I want to learn this, I want to expand in this way?
I remember when we first moved to Asheville, and things were, it really was a time of darkness in a way. You had received a teaching position. I was unemployed. We were broke. We had no money at all. And you were up at the pool and ran into someone, and out of the conversation, she described how her father was refurbishing this little office building not less than a mile from where we lived.
I told her about our plans, our dreams, which didn't seem quite real, but I still talked about them, and she said, oh, that's amazing. I know of a building that's going to be renovated.
So I went down to speak to him, and my experience, I would always remember this, was that he dismissed me. He did not see me as a business person, being qualified to even be having this conversation. And, I can't blame him, because I was not a business person. I didn't know anything about business at that time. But I left the meeting with him and came home and got angry because of how he had treated me. Motivated might be a better word.
Yeah.
So I wrote him a letter, not to make him out to be wrong or anything, but just said, I really have an interest in wanting to rent this, although I had no idea how we were going to do that. And I didn't hear back from him for a couple of months. And he called me on the phone and said, I'm down here at the space. Can you come down here? So, it's less than a mile from the house. So I was there in a few minutes and walked in, and he looked at me and he said, Hayden, I'm not telling you that I'm going to rent it to you, but if I did, what do you need? Well, here we are at that intersection that what I refer to as a brick wall when I was in my early 30s. Is it possible that we could pull this off? But I don't know the answer to the question. So I started making up stuff. Well, I need this big room, I need this, I need that, etc. And we ended the conversation.
You said, do you think you need a bathroom? You said, that'd be
yeah,
good.
Oh yeah, don't forget the bathroom. Well, we had a little kitchenette that we talked about, and so I didn't give it much thought. I came home, and I think it was about 3 months later, he called me on the phone. He said, your building is ready. I need for you to come down here and sign the contract. And I almost I mean, it just took me back. I said, I'm sorry, what? And then he got angry with me and he said, Haydn, come down here and sign the contract right now, or I'm giving it to somebody else because there are a lot of people who want to rent this. And I said, I'll be right there. Well, I had to convince him to give me 30 minutes because I came up to a bank up here on Tunnel Road, and like all idiots do when they're broke, I took out a $2,000 cash advance on a credit card, probably had 18% interest on it, but I had to come up with a security deposit. And then we were looking at, I think it was $1,000 a month back in 1994. I think that's correct, 1993, $1,000 a month. It was a 2-year contract. I signed the contract, gave him his $2,000, and I went and found you. And I started crying, and I said, I don't know what I've done. I've sent us straight into bankruptcy, or I've set us free. And right now I don't know what I've done, but I did know this. This is the dividing line that Smothermon was talking about.
And when we move out of non-existence and we make that choice and we take that risk and we step out into the abyss, not knowing if the walkway is going to appear or not, it takes us back to normal, which is when we come into our human body. What a shock that must be, to come into a human body and come out into the world, and we're back to normal. And it's normal in the very best sense, not like average, but it's normal. Like children are normal. They cry when they want to cry. They laugh and spin and dance and sing when they want to do those things. They see, but they don't judge. They accept everything. If you try to get a child to smile that doesn't want to smile, they don't do it. But of course we learn things how to be socially acceptable, but children are just normal in the very best way.
But it was, I would say, and just hanging on for just a second to that event, which was so major, I think it was about 2 years after we'd been renting from him, and I had to talk to him. By this time we had a really good relationship, and it was,
he was a great
I trusted him, and he trusted us. But I sat down one day with him and I said, I'm going to have to break the lease because I'm not going to be able to keep paying for this. And he wouldn't let me. Instead, he decreased the rent a little bit, and he said, do not give up. He said, you're going to be fine.
You're going to make it.
You're going to make it, Haydn, but, don't give up. He wouldn't even let me break the lease. And I was sitting there going, but how are we going to pay for it? In making this leap out of non-existence, you call forth the powers of life to start showing up, the connections, the network, the decisions that have to be made in order for your dream to begin to become a reality for you. At the same time, therein lies the danger. But this takes us up into emergency, because as time goes by, everything starts getting busy. As I would say to Terry, I said, Terry, every single phone call, answer it as though this is the one. This is the one that's going to catapult us into, the future. And sure enough, that one phone call came.
And it's funny, well, when I left the classroom to come to work with you, talk about emergency, you were starting to get busy, not busy enough to support,
Right.
probably everything. But I left the classroom, and I remember our oldest son said, so just to be clear, you're speaking to me, because you're the only one with a job, right?
Right. Okay.
That fear that comes
Here
in
we
go. Are we going to have enough?
Well, this is
everything?
I don't like talking about myself, but if I do not refer to these things from a personal point of view, and particularly from a lived experience of having walked this path, that I don't know what value there is that I have to share in just talking about, for example, 10 levels of integrity. Mm-hmm. But having had the lived experience of this work, it allows me to speak with a lot of conviction. But the individual has to translate it for themselves in the way that works for them. What is your dream? what is it that you really want to be?
That you would risk injury and danger to have in your life, to become.
To be able to look in the mirror and say to yourself, I did this. And I'm not talking about from your ego. I'm talking about from your heart. From that as deeply as you can, to speak to yourself from the level of your soul, of why you are here. What is your destiny? What did you come here to accomplish? Because we're going to have to move into that danger of, as Terry mentioned earlier, we probably are going to have to give up some relationships. We're going to have to stop hanging around certain people that have not been good for us, that are not on the same path that we are. But it does turn into an emergency room. Then you're going to have to hire more staff. Everything is changing.
But
it's expanding and enlarging.
This aspect of being willing to take a risk, of being willing to put ourselves out there, that brings us to the next level of normal. And if you think about the first time you were in normal, I guess when you were born, we're born into normal, according to Ron Smothermon and his work in integrity. It's all we do when we're little. We're taking risks. You take your first step, of course you fall down. You try to ride a bike, of course you run into a tree or skin your knee or whatever it is. That's part of our experience. So back in normal, we're willing to take risks. We're willing to put ourselves out there. But this time we're not 9 months old or 13 months old or 18 months old. This time we have experience. We have knowledge. We know better how to navigate and how to maneuver. So
the danger is behind us now in normal. Now we are, the expansion is starting for the individual. And another word that I use for normal is being in the sandbox. It's like being a little kid in the sandbox. Everybody shares their toys. It's really a unified...
There's no room for any disloyal or oppositional people. You don't see children being disloyal or oppositional. I do remember when our son was like 4 and his big sister goes off to school, leaves her Halloween candy in the room and comes back and there are candy wrappers all over. And she said loudly, "Who got in my Halloween candy?" And the 4-year-old said, "I did." He was totally fine telling the truth. He learned quickly, as we do, that telling the truth doesn't always end up with how you want things to be, because she let him have it, said, "Don't get in my candy again." So the next day she goes to school, leaves her candy there. The 4-year-old gets back in it. She comes home, "No, I told you not to get in my candy." He paused for a second, and then he said out loud, my beautiful 4-year-old, "Dad did it." So when we're little and we're born into normal and we start losing our integrity and we start figuring out, what do I have to do in order to be okay? Because now we have the wherewithal, the experience, the understanding, what I need to do, what's going to work out for me long term, not just a short term.
So here is the descent into the physical body, into birth. Then we must make an ascent to the greater knowledge and understanding of who we are and what we're doing here. And then we have to make another descent back down into our everyday life to go about the business of transforming our life. So the efforts that are made within the physical, although the person may not have any understanding whatsoever of spirituality or a spiritual path, this is mimicking that spiritual path through the descent, ascent, and descent again.
And especially because in the leadership ladder, there are 2 conditions above normal. So we're born into normal and then we head down. By age 18, 21, everybody has experienced disloyalty. But as we move back up, we re-engage with normal, and then there are 2 levels above that. And so that's the spiritual to me that we get to ascend back to and that we get to experience and claim. And
well, it's interesting that Smothermon separates those 2 stages of abundance and empowerment. He separates that from the physical birth process. So my idea about that and what he was suggesting is that, normal, which is it's a space where the enlargement has taken place. You realize that you can accomplish anything, that you can do anything, and that everything is operating in really almost a unified, perfect manner. And so at this level, you have the luxury of being generous. You have the luxury of sharing your ideas with other people and helping them begin to reach their goals. But this issue of abundance and empowerment they are not learned outcomes. They are conditions of being that you acquire.
A natural evolution of the dojo work.
Exactly. Everything has now added up. Everything has combined to produce what I refer to as knowledge through identity. You know it now because you are it now. It's not just a line in a book. It's not just your favorite quote. It is what you have become. And so this is a knowledge of existence that it's acquired, but it comes as a result of having done the work, which I can't speak enough of. I remember this had a really big impact on me. It was so cute. It only took a minute. But we were at a baseball game, and a mother was sitting in front of us, and I look over the right, and I see this little girl. I think she was maybe around 4. She's holding the hand of another little girl, and they come running up, and now I see, that this woman sitting in front of us is the 4-year-old's mother. And the 4-year-old looks at her mother and says, and so excited, and said, Mama, this is my new best friend. And her mother looks at her and says, well, what's her name? And the 4-year-old turns, looks at the little girl whose hand she is holding, and says, what's your name? She didn't even know her name because she didn't need to. It was a new best friend, and that is what happens in normal. Everything, you see the connection there is no division. Even though division is being practiced by those down at the bottom of the scale, you see the total picture of what it is that's trying to evolve and expand.
And the interesting thing about getting back to normal, which is quite profound, if we can achieve that, it's not that we're not sometimes tempted, or the lower mind doesn't say stick 'em, or respond this way, or let your feelings be hurt and withdraw, or whatever it is. It's that it's just not authentic anymore. It's like I could do it. I feel it a little bit. I had this twinge, but it doesn't feel like me anymore. It's almost like a shadow of me, or the residual of an old way of looking at things, but it's not the truth of who I am or how I want to experience myself.
Well, I want to be clear about something, and I want to keep this conversation real, because it's very easy to talk about integrity in step 1, step 2, step 3, and while that the concepts that Smothermon produced are extremely valuable, there's still this issue of walking the path. So I want to be really clear about something. You see, it's not that you don't want to engage in your old behaviors. It's not that you don't want to lie or cheat or a million other things. It's that you can't, because you would be betraying yourself, which you're no longer willing to do, in spite of the temptations and the forces of the lower mind that are constantly calling you to ignore your integrity. But you've had enough of that, and you see how that worked out for you when you were young. So the lower mind doesn't go away, but it can and hopefully does become subservient to your higher mind. In fact, I'd go so far to say that not a single day can go by without any individual having the chance to ignore their integrity. So don't be naive, but...
And even in a real subtle way, like it's easy to look out there in the world and see this massive lack of integrity, but in our lives that aren't on public display, there's so many ways that we can do it, like not helping somebody when we could, and it would have just taken a minute of our time because I'm busy or whatever that is. The ego, the small self, would rather be a victim in some grand dramatic play than a master in a quiet life or a quiet unfolding. The mother called it a crisis of the soul's choice. We won't wake up because we should, because someone tells us to. It's certainly not going to be legislated. We'll wake up because being divided just eventually becomes mathematically and spiritually untenable. It's unlivable. We'll wake up to this memory that I did accept everyone as my brother or as my sister. So it's not about being good. Frankly, being good is not really enough. It's about being one in myself, but also with others. So it's like with the French toast story. It wasn't I didn't want to listen to my small voice and say, he's so picky, he can just go hungry if he can't eat what I make. I did hear that. But then I chose to respond from my whole and complete self. And I do think it's because of all this work that we've done, Haydn. It's not something that always comes naturally. There's kind of that pull back to the lower self at times, or the ego. But when when any of us chooses to respond from our whole and complete self, not needing anything from anybody else in order to be okay, not needing to be respected or liked or accepted, that allows us to tap into empowerment and abundance. And then I could just make the French toast again. And like I said, the funny thing is, when I act from my small self, I feel small. I get small outcomes. I feel petty and not good. But when we function from the condition of being whole and complete, from our integrity, we get outcomes that we enjoy so much more and that have lasting impact. So, you can ask yourself, in any given situation, how do I want to experience myself in this moment? And also, after I've answered, how do I want to experience myself? How do I want to feel about myself after this encounter? Then you could ask yourself, what do I want to have happen next? And that's empowerment, and that's abundance.
So I'll summarize a little bit here. Integrity is the condition of being whole and complete, needing nothing from anybody or anything for any reason to be okay. To imagine getting to a place in your life where you no longer are seeking rewards from any other human being. There's a royal freedom that comes with living that way, but that's the work. And if you don't have integrity, I promise you, others know it. They know it about you. You don't know it, but they do. And no one in disloyalty thinks that anyone else knows what they're doing, but they do. See, there's a reason why you feel guilty or ashamed about your mistakes, and that is because of the transcendent within, the higher you, the soul. There's the gravity, of course, of the physical universe, which is real, but there's also the gravity of the soul that continues to guide you to higher spaces, or at least is trying to. The reference point of guilt and shame is not the mistake you made, but it is that the transcendent within you knows that the mistake was not necessary. So the value of integrity is the beginning of forging a true center in your being, a center that can hold in the middle of a storm that is not dependent upon anything outside of you. So I'll say it again. If you don't have integrity, you got nothing. That's just the way that it is.
I always compare it to a basketball that has all the air in it, so it holds its shape. You can bounce it, you can shoot it, but if it's flat, what a dud.
Right.
That's kind of how it is when we're not functioning.
Looks like a basketball, but it's not.
It doesn't really work. So we really want you to have something practical to take with you. And here are our suggestions for moving up the ladder and strengthening your integrity. Tell the truth. Give up the need to be right. Do the dojo work. Use your relationships, use your work as a place to practice being the very best that you can be. And also with that, form a relationship with someone else who's made it out of the mess, who you trust, who you can learn from. If you make a mistake, apologize. Take responsibility, be accountable, teach people that they can trust you. Take the time to dream. What does your heart really desire? What do you want in your life? What do you want to do? And then take the risk and face the danger of enlarging yourself and your life. Ask for help when you need it. That it will show up. That's how it works. Dig in and practice your integrity at all costs, even the little things. Even if you have to just zip it sometimes and not say what your ego wants to say. Practice your integrity. Expand. Share your strengths and share your ideas with other people. Don't be so afraid that what you have to share isn't worth it. Trust yourself. Be generous. And be an instrument of this path of self-realization. Show other people how it's done through your actions. Everyone knows how not to do it. Be an example of how to do it, of how to demonstrate integrity, of being that spark of the divine, not only in your own life, but in the lives of others. And if this conversation has struck a chord with you, and we hope it has, if you're tired of this internal fragmentation and you want to explore this movement towards your own wholeness, towards your integrity more deeply, we would love to meet you in person. And you can join Haydn and me at the Omega Institute. We're going to be there July 31st through August 2nd. And we'll be diving deep into consciousness, evolution, and this practical shift from the scarcity self into your most authentic self. And you can find all the details at truthspringasheville.com or right here in the show notes. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today, and we hope to have the chance to meet you soon.
Thank you.